They did Rudeus so wrong. They did Rudeus so wrong. I mean, the last scene of episode 10 of Mushoku Tensei, yes, he does feel something, standing at salute again, but he at least in the novel waits till he gets back to his room before he tries something. I just have this mental image of like the studio just like, okay, we gotta adapt this part. Should we animate him going back to his room, or maybe just at least draw his room and say that he went home? No, just handle it there. It's Rudeus. It ain't gonna affect his canon or anything if he does it when he's in the library. It's like, dude, in the library, it doesn't really seem like there's that many people in there. Like, it's usually pretty empty looking, but at least find a corner or something to do it in. But anyways, yeah, solid episode overall. I have to admit, it seems like the quality came down just a smidge. Last few episodes, I haven't had too much problem with the quality, but for some reason, this episode started to kind of show its scars a little bit again. But it did what it needed to do. And while they did cover like all the major plot points, they did kind of skip a lot of the mechanics and stuff about the world. There's a few changes in this episode that I thought was a little bit odd. I think the only one that's a little bit of a myth is probably around Cliff. The aspect of him just randomly asking about curses, and Rudeus is like, oh, he keeps asking about curses for some reason. Rudeus fully knows what Cliff is doing right here, and it's kind of an odd change. But yeah, as per usual, this perspective of somebody that has read up to now I'm into volume 14 at this point, so I've read what's going to be covered in the second season, but I'm not going to go over any spoilers. I'm just going to give my thoughts on the episode itself, and also fill in the gaps where things were not adapted that they probably won't get around to adapting later. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump right into episode 10. Opening up the episode, we jump right into Sylphiette's side story. I'm so glad that we finally get some Sylphiette side stories. It seems like overall, mostly all the Sylphiette... For those who don't know, for this volume and the previous volume, there's a lot of these little small chapters where it's just Sylphie's perspective, what she's going through, her struggles and all that kind of stuff, which is unfortunately kind of adding to the fuel of the anime-onlys not liking Fitz because of what Fitz is not saying. Well, in the Sylphiette side stories, we're getting a lot of perspective of the struggles that Fitz is going through. That she wants to say what she wants to say, but she can't because she has these struggles that she's going through. And we're getting a glimpse of it in this little segment where you're seeing that, yes, Fitz is really struggling with the idea that, not the fact that Rudeus hangs out with other women, yes, technically this entire time, she's always been worried about that. Seeing Linia and Pursena, how, beautiful they are, they have these nice figures. She's doesn't really have that typical kind of figure that most people are drawn to. The gray rats are always into women that have large chests. She doesn't have the large chest. But what's really hitting her right here, and I'm really glad they're covering this segment right here, because I think this is really the point in which Sylphie is finally opening her eyes to, I need to take action now. And that is not Linia. It's not Pursena, because every time she sees him with them, she's always like, well, he's not doing anything. Maybe he's choosing not to get into a physical relationship. But Nanahoshi's different. With Nanahoshi, he's acting differently. They're much more intimate together. And she doesn't know why. We know why, and that's because he's from this other world, and they have this bond. They have a commonality between the two of them in the fact that, yes, they both share a lot of experiences from their previous world. And yes, from Nanahoshi's perspective, it's the first person that she feels comfortable with because everybody else is not normal. Like, she doesn't view this world and the people in it as real. She just wants to get back home. So now she finally has somebody that is like her in this other world, and so she's much more comfortable with them. She's not pushing them away, and she's much more inviting. And so Fitz is seeing that as she's possibly likes Rudeus. In this moment, yes, Fitz is basically saying, look, I don't think they're romantic with each other, but it does seem more intimate. Rudeus has been around a lot of girls, but Silent is special to him. But she also knows the idea that this is Rudeus, though. Rudeus is the type that when he sees somebody in trouble, he wants to help them. And so obviously with Nanahoshi, she seemed to have a problem and he's wanting to help her out with it. But they share a special connection and they're almost seemingly closer than even Sylphie was with Rudeus back in Buena Village. And that's, yes, it doesn't sit right with her. This girl is now sitting in my chair and I don't like that. I'm supposed to be sitting there next to him. This is actually a perspective of when they were at Nanahoshi's place. It's like they're sitting next to each other and talking. It's like, I'm supposed to be sitting there. But I do like, because Sylphie is admitting here that she doesn't hate Silent. She doesn't have a grudge or a hatred for Silent. She just doesn't like the idea that she's taking Rudeus away from her. It's jealousy, not necessarily hatred. It was making her heart hurt. I do like in the novels, like here, she kind of knows this idea that, it's kind of like almost childish kind of mentality. It's a jealousy, obviously. This idea that she's like, well, you can't be in that chair, Nanahoshi, because you have to spend years with him and make memories. It's like that aspect of, I went through all this experiences with him. Like, I made memories with him. It's almost like she's putting into different words the idea of Nanahoshi cutting in line. Like, I built to have a relationship with him. Even though she's not acknowledging the idea at that time that she's hiding who she is, Nanahoshi's cutting in line. I built up this relationship, and now she just comes in and she's already got this built relationship. Why do the two of them seem to have something already built, even though they just met? Again, it's that cool idea that she doesn't understand that there is a personal bond between the two of them that is literally just their own experiences being in another world. But the sad thing that kind of wraps up the scene is her acknowledging that Ariel at some point said, I can handle Rudeus' situation myself. If I want to use Fitz and still hang out with Rudeus and not reveal who I am, that's fine. But Ariel told her that if you don't think there's a chance the two of you can get together, I want you to stop hanging out with him as Fitz. I want you to stop having Fitz interact with him. Meaning, if you're not going to make this happen, don't keep on this charade as Fitz. If you don't think you're going to have a relationship, don't continue this. Which would, yes, essentially in Sylphie's mind mean that we have to separate. I'm going to have to leave Rudeus, which she assumes Rudeus would be fine with that. If he lost Fitz, if he never had Sylphie, he'd probably be fine. He would move on. That's Rudeus. Rudeus is always moving forward. Noting this idea that Rudeus has been through so much, but yet he keeps walking forward. She sees him as strong. Whereas her, in this moment, realizing that she's a coward. She's wondering what she's supposed to do because she knows that she has to come out and say, hey, look, I'm Sylphie. But she can't do it. She's afraid. And she doesn't know what happened to that courage that she wants. She thought she was stronger. This is a girl, again, that technically was transported at 10 years old to an unknown place, has been fighting off assassins, and has seemingly become extremely powerful. But even still, this is the one thing that's super difficult for her. And it's making her realize, wait, I am actually a coward. What happened to my bravery? It's a really cool segment. Like I said, it's finally showing at least the anime-only viewers this struggle that she's been going through for a long time. Now, we haven't gotten into this kind of detail into this point, so it makes sense, but it's still great. But yes, the next scene I really, really liked, and I'm sad that the anime skipped it, but at the same time, it makes perfect sense. We're getting into this little training session with Rudeus. He's doing his usual morning routine, but now Badigadi's showing up. Standing there, folded arms, just nodding his head at Rudeus. Rudeus doesn't even know how to handle the fact that he's there. But yes, we get into battle auras. And it's kind of an odd choice not to really get into this because this is kind of one of those aspects that kind of expands the mechanics of the world a lot. It explains a whole lot. But yes, Badigadi questions him, like, why are you training without your battle aura? Like, this is a normal thing that people do. Why aren't you using a battle aura? Like, even if you're training, you would be creating this battle aura. But yeah, Rudeus questions him, like what? How does a battle aura work? Badigadi explains that it's a technique that uses mana to improve your physical abilities, strengthening you to unnatural extremes. When he asks how it works, Badigadi explains how it's just simply spreading a field of mana across your entire body, and then you press it tightly against yourself. It's almost like you're creating this bubble of this film that goes over your entire body. Which, yes, Rudeus at this point kind of jokes, like, oh yeah, that was really great advice. You could definitely replace all the professors here. But Rudeus realized, yes, I could probably gain quite a few power levels if I could figure out how to master this. But no matter how much he manipulated his mana, Rudeus seen no change. He thought that he'd gotten stronger, but maybe it was a placebo effect. After attempting it several times, Badigadi finally spoke up. It looks like you ain't got no talent for this, boy. Like, literally, here's this thing, this battle aura. It uses mana, which Rudeus has massive amounts, and Rudeus can't seem to get it to work. It doesn't seem like it's improving him. It doesn't seem like it's connecting or something like that. This was his chance of really, really getting stronger. Has no talent for it. Apparently, normally battle auras were something that people automatically generated after spending so much time doing physical training. He put in good effort, but he didn't have the knack for it. It seemed that some just could never generate battle aura, no matter how intense their regimen. Rudeus literally just can't produce one. But this didn't faze Badigadi. You'd think that Badigadi would be like, well, I guess you're a failure. No, he laughed and said, it's not like you need it. He said that Laplace never cloaked himself in a battle aura either. The demon god himself never did. But he does admit that Laplace was also truly powerful. Rudeus noted that, yeah, Badigadi often used the demon god Laplace as a comparison. So we asked him, did you actually meet him? Badigadi said, yes, he nearly annihilated my entire body with a single blow. It took him some time to reform after that. He thought that he actually killed him for a moment. According to Badigadi, Laplace was extremely shady character, but master of using mana. Rudeus assumed, okay, well, if Laplace has like this crazy mana pool like I do, he can't create a battle aura. Can I get strong if I do learn to fight like Laplace did? But Badigadi said, no, I don't recommend trying it. If you tried using your mana the way he did, you blow your entire body apart in an instant. He said it's bizarre for a human to even have that much mana inside of themselves in the first place. So this idea that because Laplace is not human, and he has this massive amount of mana, he's able to strengthen himself and use it in a way that a human's body wouldn't be able to. So they have the same mana pool, but Rudeus would not be able to, his body wouldn't be able to take it. And that's the point in which we get back in towards the anime stuff here, where Badigadi is questioning him, why do you want to get stronger? While Rudeus is thinking about, look, yeah, I nearly got killed by Orsted. Badigadi explains quite a bit here. He says that he's known many men who sought fame and strength to an excessive degree, and it never ended well for them. Take my nephew, for example. Too proud by half that one. He settled down a bit after nearly dying, but up until then, he was obsessed with becoming the strongest man in the world. There's more important things in life than that. This idea of this lesson that can be learned, this idea of seeking power only to meet defeat, and then realizing that there's more important things than that. But yes, which the answer is women. You'll know when you have one. And yes, of course, that's when Rudeus asks him about his impotence, which Badigadi's like, no, I don't know. I have no idea. But a cool little segment, like I said, it really does expand the mechanics of the world itself. This is the kind of stuff that me personally, especially reading through the novel series, I just eat this stuff up. And I'm going to get into more of that stuff later on because there's a lot of that study around the magic and stuff that they completely skip that I'll get into. But yes, we cut to Linia and Pursena. Of course, it's a point which they're trying to push Rudeus to become the big dog in the place. I kind of mentioned all that stuff that was skipped in the last chapters in the previous episode. This is sort of an extension of that. Them really kind of pushing him to become that top dog. Then we cut to the lunchroom, which the reason why there is one of those funny things. Like the previous episodes, for some reason, Rudeus is outside eating, and suddenly, for some reason, he decides to eat inside the lunchroom. Well, that's because he actually built a shelter outside because it was getting colder. And then Genius came by and yelled at Rudeus, so they had to go inside. And Rudeus didn't want to sit on the floor that Elinalise and Cliff was because it's hard to watch them being mushy. So they decided to be at the first floor. But yes. I'm waiting for the controversy to come out of this whole segment. Badigadi coming in. He got a nice stash from, I think it was the vice principal or the principal. He got this nice stash of liquor, and Julie's looking at it like, oh, like I want some of that. But it is cool because right here, Rudeus in his own mind is having that cultural struggle. In a lot of cases throughout the series, and again, this is kind of an added thing to that whole element of people being outraged about how Rudeus reacts to things like forced servitude. This is one of those moments where Rudeus is looking at this. It seems like everybody is fine with the idea of Julie drinking. This is a girl that's like 6 years old. Why would she be drinking liquor? Well, that's just a normal thing for the dwarves. At that age, they're already drinking. So he realizes very quickly, despite the fact that he's like, I don't really think I like the idea of Julie drinking, he immediately snaps his mind going, wait, I'm the only one that seems to be upset about this. So maybe I shouldn't be injecting myself in the situation. This is something normal in this world. This is something normal for dwarves. What am I to say? So he kind of allows it. Again, it's one of those aspects that kind of gets missed, and sadly, it doesn't kind of show that inner struggle that he's having in the scene that he was technically considering going, no, I don't like that. Yeah, we have the little gossip happening nearby, which of course is kind of making Rudeus struggle with his own, essentially self-confidence. He doesn't want to get himself hot-headed. Everybody's praising him, talking about how great he is, but he doesn't want to get a hot head because, yes, Orsted taught him a very valuable lesson. You get too full of yourself, and you get knocked down. But yeah, I love this scene with Julie drinking. It was super cute. Badigadi, blah! And poor Zenoba can't partake. But yeah, that's when we cut to Nanahoshi and the summoning experiments. There's a lot of stuff in here. They covered most of the stuff. I do like that emphasis, the idea that, okay, they're acknowledging this is a step-by-step process. We're starting with literally summoning a feather, summoning an insect leg. They're starting from these very small circles that do take a lot of mana, but at the same time, it doesn't seem like it's proving like great results. It's like, I think I'm going to pour my mana in this thing, and suddenly we're going to get this grand achievement. Something crazy is going to happen.
But in actuality, what Nanahoshi, what Rudeus is fearful of is the idea that, okay, what is the goal here? She says, I want to summon a person. Well, that's not good, because the last time that happened, the displacement incident happened. Why would you want to do this? And she's like, well, look, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to cause that to happen. That's not my goal here. I'm starting from the basics. She actually went out and had to learn all this stuff because this world doesn't have us. You don't go to a bookstore and get a book on summoning people. I mean, teleportation itself is banned. You don't just go out and find summon person book. You have to learn it. She got the basic concept, and she's having to build on that basic concept until she gets to this goal. And so she's making these small circles. He's putting mana into it, summoning something. It seems pointless, but she's building from the ground up. She's building the code from the first character all the way into this grand thing that she'll fully understand, and thus she'll know how it's working, and so she won't cause that problem. I like that aspect that it quickly solidifies Nanahoshi's not messing with this stuff. This is something that she's very serious about. She's been studying for a long time. It's been a slow process because she didn't have basically a mana battery like Rudeus. There's a lot of, right now, what essentially he's doing is he's doing a lot of the tests that she decided that she didn't want to do. She had all these different summoning circles that she wanted to do, but she had limited supply of these crystals. Because if you think about it, yes, she does have the supply chain. She's making a lot of money. She has to spend all that money buying crystals to supply mana into these circles, but there's a limited supply of them. She can't just buy everything. So she was picking and choosing. Now she can have him do everything. They didn't mention the anime, but yes, Fitz was technically visiting from time to time. She would come by and hang out with them, and this was the point which Rudeus actually realized how much mana he was actually using. Because again, Rudeus has this massive jug, and he's activating all these magic circles, and he's like, okay, that was easy. Fitz comes in and hangs out. She's out of mana within 20 scrolls or so. And that makes Rudeus realize, holy crap, so this is taking a lot of mana. Fitz had noted that one of the scrolls that they were activating was just like an advanced tier spell, which was bizarre to Rudeus because it seemed like these things weren't really doing anything. Some of these circles weren't producing any effect, and he was wondering why it was costing so much mana. Then it made sense because he's realizing, oh yeah, that's right, these circles were trying to summon things from another world. So I guess it makes sense that there's a lot of mana needing to stretch out to possibly some other world, or at least produce an effect to achieve transfer to another world. But unfortunately, at some point, Fitz realized, look, I can't help you guys with these experiments because if I waste all my mana doing these scrolls, I can't protect Ariel. Like if she spends all her mana doing 20 scrolls and then goes back to guard Ariel, goes to cast a spell to protect her, can't because she's out of mana, it makes sense. But still, Rudeus said, look, just having you here is enough for me. He didn't want to discard Fitz just because Fitz wasn't useful in the situation. It was reassuring having her there. Or him, technically, for Rudeus. But yeah, it's kind of funny. Rudeus kind of going, okay, I kind of want to learn about summoning too. Can you help me out? She's like, well, that's my information. I can't divulge it. This is like her, yeah, basically like she puts it, this idea, this is my gambling card. Like I have to hold this. This is the only thing that I really have. So I can't just give it to you willy-nilly. She offers him to answer one question, and then he kind of complains about the fact that he's only going to be able to ask one question, but then that's when she throws him the book. The book was called Sig's Summoning Book. It was about a witch named Sig, who summoned many fearsome fiends for various reasons. In the end, she used an enormous offering of mana to call forth a creature stronger than her, and it promptly killed her and ate her. Her student bitterly lamented this tragedy, and swore to never summon anything beyond ability to control. Rudeus felt that it was a good takeaway. If he used all of his mana to summon the strongest creature he could, it would be too much for him to handle. He made sure to understand the risk before doing anything dramatic. He noted that sadly the book didn't really have much information, no circles or any information on how the fiends themselves were summoned. But you kind of see the reason why she possibly gave him this book. You had this whole conversation about the displacement incident, how she's methodically going through step by step to create this process. Then he's immediately asking, okay, how do I summon? Give me information on how to summon. This is kind of that starting point. It's this information of, before you start anything, set your limits. Know how far you can really stretch, otherwise it's going to cause tragedy. But the next part, we pretty much get into a segment that was, again, kind of cut from the anime, is Fitz and Rudeus get done helping out Nanahoshi, and they go to head home. And Fitz welcomes him to kind of walk with her along the side of the girls' dorm where he's not supposed to be. She knows the fact that he's actually become popular with the girls. He was taking down the bad guys, but he wasn't harming normal people. He took down a demon king, he beat a bunch of beast folk warriors. Fitz told him that they were scared of him at first, but Linia and Pursena,
they were doing some nice damage control. They were going around and pretty much telling people that he's a nice guy and he never picked on weaklings. It's so funny because right here, Fitz is like impersonating Linia's voice, saying that like, yeah, he's a good guy, and she had her hands up like cat ears, and he said that it's unfairly cute that he did that. But yeah, Fitz is kind of noting the idea that, yeah, you have shabby clothes, but you got a handsome face, and the girls like that gloomy look. And also that Rudeus wasn't a pushy jerk, despite the fact that he's extremely powerful. So it's kind of getting that sense that he's getting popular amongst the people. And a lot of that has to do with the fact of what Linia and Pursena is doing in the background to sort of help him. And here's an interesting part that gets into the whole aspect of Rudeus and bullying in itself. Fitz mentioned the fact that Linia and Pursena were pestering Goliad over the incident that he had with her. The whole Pantsu thing and Goliad confronting him. Fitz never intervened, hoping that Goliad would learn something from this. Because yes, from Fitz's perspective, Goliad jumped to conclusions, attacked Rudeus, who Fitz believes is a good person. And so if Fitz sees that Linia and Pursena is like hassling Goliad over that whole incident, she's gonna be like, okay, well, hopefully Goliad's gonna learn something. But Rudeus didn't like this, of course. He's seen it as bullying. Linia and Pursena are bullying Goliad over me. He didn't like it. So he asked Fitz, look, tell him not to harass Goliad too much. Fitz didn't see it as harassment, but more just them teasing. But Rudeus knew that a running joke like this could eventually turn to bullying. This idea that, you have somebody and you're like, hey, what's going on, frizzle face or something like that, because somebody's got like a frizzle on their face with their hair or whatever, and you're like, that's great. And then like over weeks and weeks, you keep saying, what's up, frizzy face? Eventually it turns to bullying. Eventually the person doesn't like it. It's hurting them. They don't like this to becoming them. It's the same concept here. He doesn't want that to turn into that. He didn't have any grudge or hatred towards Goliad. So he told Fitz, please, just keep an eye on things. Which she agreed, like, yeah, that makes sense. You really are a good person. Again, it's that whole aspect of him kind of realizing something just based on his own experience. I don't want this to happen. But yeah, we have the whole scene with Julie doing her usual training. You see that she's carving her figurines and falling asleep afterwards. They never mentioned that whole aspect, but yeah, it's technically a lot of work for her. Let the poor girl sleep. You kind of notice the fact that she's doing good, but she's kind of sloppy with the details. Like, her hands are very dexterous. I mean, that's the whole thing with the dwarves themselves. But if you notice in the anime, they have this whole scene where Rudeus is making a figurine. This figurine is of Fitz. He's making a figurine of Fitz. I don't know if people got that from the anime. It kind of made sense because he started making the chest grow and then he got all conflicted with it. This is where we get that sense that he's making a Fitz figurine. Which is kind of that little thing where I'm like, I kind of like what the anime did with this, because with the anime, it's putting more emphasis on how that's making him struggle inside. He's making this figurine, he accidentally makes a chest, and then suddenly he's becoming conflicted. He doesn't really know what he thinks. It becomes a lot more serious of a tone. In the novel, the Fitz figurine is brought up here, and it's more done in jest. This idea that he's looking at the figurine, he's thinking, what do I put between the legs? And he's conflicted over it. And then eventually Zenoba notices and he's like, well, I can go over there and I can rip his clothes off from behind and you can find out. And he's like, no, I don't want to do that. My mind immediately went to, when I read this whole segment, was like, yeah, Rudeus had that experience with that same person ripping off the clothes and it didn't end well. Please don't do that. But yeah, it's more comical here and more lighthearted in this idea that he doesn't really know what's underneath Fitz's clothes. Fitz is always wearing all these layers, so he doesn't even know a lot of the figure, the chest, the hips, or anything like that. And then it kind of shifts into, I don't really want to put something in between the legs, but at the same time, I don't want Fitz to be angry if I portray his figurine as a girl. So there you have it. But yes, we get into our routine. Rudeus not seeing Fitz much, eventually receiving the letter from Soldat. To give a little more context here, essentially Soldat sent him a letter because he arrived in the town, he wants to hang out. The original reason why Soldat is there is because he's a part of Step Leader, and Step Leader is a part of the Thunderbolt clan. The Thunderbolt clan has their meeting in this town every 2 to 3 months. But they decided to have it early because, why? Yes, they were called there because of Badigadi. When Badigadi first arrived, they sent out letters to all of the adventurers saying, come to this town. Badigadi is here. We need help. And so, yes, Step Leader was on the way there. And they arrived. They went, hey, yeah, that whole situation got handled, but let's have our meeting anyways. So that's the reason why Soldat's actually there. Good job, Badigadi. He brought the bros back together.
A side effect of Badigadi showing up is that he brings the bros back together. Now, here's, like I said earlier, this is probably the only little kind of frustrating moment of the entire anime adaptation of this segment. And this idea that Rudeus, while he's heading to the bar to go see Soldat, he brings Elinalise, and of course Cliff comes with Elinalise. Rudeus right here is talking about how Cliff is currently studying to remove Elinalise's curse. He promised Elinalise, I'm going to find a way to get rid of your curse, and then we're going to get married. Well, he's trying to figure out a way to do that. Elinalise has to sleep with people on a regular basis. He wants to remove that. So as they're walking, Cliff is boasting about his new research plans. He was studying the curse intensively with a goal to lifting it completely. But curses have been studied since ancient times. 6 months didn't yield him any major success. However, Cliff was still confident, not giving up. He was a genius, of course. Rudeus admired his resolve. Like, this guy, despite 6 months, he is dedicated. I'm going to help Elinalise. Well, he asked Rudeus his opinion, and Rudeus mentions, well, I heard that Laplace once transferred his own curse into a number of objects and used it to pass it to a certain tribe of demons. Cliff's like, what? Objects? He said, yeah, to be specific, the spears the Superbs used during the Laplace War. Thanks to the curse on their weapons, they lost their sanity and ended up getting the reputations of mindless killers. This shocked Cliff. What? I've never heard of this before. Is this actually true? He's like, well, I only heard it secondhand, so I can't really say if it's true. Still, Cliff caught on to this. That's intriguing. He didn't know, and honestly nobody knew, the idea of actually transferring a curse to an object. But that was enough for him. That was extremely helpful for him. He thanks Rudeus, like, thank you, that's actually a big, massive help. He now at least has a goal to go towards. Rudeus didn't even know if this concept was even done before by anybody else, or if it was taboo. He thought there might be some sort of precedence for trying to move a blessings to a different vessel, like with a blessed or cursed child. So he asked Cliff, you know of anybody that's tried to transfer a blessing rather than a curse? And then Cliff questioned, what? What do you mean? What does blessings have to do with anything? Here's that thing where Rudeus doesn't realize what he's talked about before and the knowledge that he has that everybody else is unaware of. Again, who told him this? The man god. The man god told him that blessings and curses are the same thing. It's just that mankind likes to put labels on it, likes to make these ones or twos, the positive and negatives. They're all the same thing. They're all a disturbance in mana. It's just we as mankind go, well, that's useless, so it's obviously a curse. Well, that's useful, so you're obviously blessed. Cliff, again, like everybody else in this world, is like, wait, what? Blessings are different. Blessings aren't have anything to do with curses. But yeah, Rudeus responds going, well, blessed children are the same as cursed ones, right? They're all born with some strange thing about their mana, which gives them an odd power. The only difference is whether the effects is positive and negative. And Cliff says, that's news to me. Again, he's like, he's just stating things like it's common knowledge, and Cliff's like, what are you talking about? But yeah, they were both looking at Rudeus with surprise, though he did realize that everything that he just mentioned was from the man god. He thought maybe it was bad that he was getting all this from him. He's like, I think you're giving me too much information. I don't think I'm supposed to know this stuff. But yeah, putting all that aside, Cliff was super excited about this. This is a cool concept that, oh yeah, I can possibly take what's afflicting Elinalise and transfer it to something else. Transfer it to a spear. Make a really horny spear. make a horny spear. Rudeus like, no, just give it to me. But in this moment, Rudeus felt that curses had some sort of connection to the so-called gods of this world. Man god, dragon god, demon god, all at least had one. Then the blessed children being supposedly divine somehow. We mentioned that with the whole thing with Cliff and Zenoba, that Cliff seen Zenoba as being touched by the divine. He wondered, is there a connection there? Is it just coincidence that they're calling this being touched by divine, that you can transfer a blessing or a curse? It just brings up massive question marks. And again, it's one of those aspects. This whole segment is like, why did we skip this stuff? But yeah, that's when we cut to the bar. Yeah, everybody's making jokes about the fact that Elinalise, the slut, has a man now. Everybody, and obviously Soldat's party knows Elinalise, and so they're all making jokes. Cliff is getting worked up. He doesn't like this, but this kind of shows an aspect of how Elinalise is good at kind of swaying the conversation. So he sees that Cliff is getting angry, so she changes the subject. Of course, right here in the anime, she's going, yeah, I found that man. Like, even I am devoted when I find that one man. It's just she didn't find the one that was for her. More the idea that this is a real man. Like, Cliff, for me, is a real man. It was a cutesy little moment. But again, it kind of shows that aspect of Elinalise able to Rudeus notes right here that he's never seen Elinalise sulky or mad. It is kind of one of those aspects at this point, I'm already kind of wondering, is there something that she's hiding, or is she just always positive? Like Badigadi and Kishirika, they're always these long-living people that just kind of keep positive all the time because maybe they've experienced bad things or they decide at some point it's good to just be positive. But still, Rudeus is kind of wondering, despite this, why does Elinalise hate Paul so much? He's like, what did Paul do so much? This lady is literally having these guys laugh about how he's with Cliff, and she's just smiling and moving the conversation forward. But yet, when I mention Paul, she gets angry. What did he do? But yeah, they have the conversation about the bags and how, yeah, they have to carry Rudeus' bags because they made so much money from the straggler. They're talking about going out and adventuring. Cliff immediately turns to being happy again because he's hearing about people talking about adventuring. Again, go back to Edis the Goblin Slayer chapter, way back there. Yeah, technically Cliff originally wanted to run away from home and become an adventurer. That's the thing that he drove for. Because when he was in the orphanage, adventurers would come by and tell him their stories. And he always wanted to be an adventurer. So hearing these people talk about adventuring, he's getting excited. So that's when they decide, oh, let's go out on an adventure. Let's take Cliff out and go adventuring. And it's kind of weird here because in the anime, it portrays Cliff as immediately going, I'm not going to take any advice from you, Rudeus. Like he's being uppity, which that is Cliff. But in actuality, what happens here in the novel is Rudeus in his own mind goes, yeah, I think he'll be fine going out there. He's hot-headed. So people are going to obviously correct him. But all these other adventurers in his party and Soldat's party, they're up in age. So Cliff would probably take their advice more acceptingly. Rather than him, Rudeus, somebody that is, I think at this point, 2 years younger than him, giving him advice, that might offend Cliff. So he decided not to go. That's why they kind of chose that. But it's still kind of cute, this idea of Elinalise seeing how excited Cliff is. Well, let's go take him out adventuring. It's so cute. I love the two of them. They're so cute. But yes, of course, Soldat had to go to his meeting. The little bro fist moment. Good times. I'm glad they included it. I'm at least glad they included Soldat coming back. Because, again, Soldat's just good bro. He's such a good bro. But yeah, the other reason why Rudeus didn't want to go with them adventuring is because he knew that he had to get back to Nanahoshi. Because if he stayed away too long, she'd get angry. He knows the idea that despite the fact that she's like a shut-in, she's actually hungry for company. She always gets sulky whenever he's gone for too long. He's kind of concerned because he does realize that she doesn't want to be in this world. She doesn't like this world. But him, as somebody that has decided to keep in this world, he was feeling it very hard to resist not telling her, hey, go outside more often. Go meet people. Which I thought was really interesting because, yes, everybody's making the connection right now. Rudeus saying that to Nanahoshi, who's a shut-in this world, come out of your room more often, is completely a 180 to him in his previous life where he was shutting in his room and people were telling him to come out. And it's like that whole thing of like hypocrisy there. You realize more than anybody what she's going through. Again, it's kind of what I was mentioning in the last Mushoku Sundays, is this idea that, yeah, technically that's that whole struggle that he has, that she's pretty much the polar opposite of him. She is what he used to be in this world. But no, he ends up kind of regretting not going with them, eventually ends up in the Commerce District. He thought about getting a magical item similar to what Fitz is using. Again, Fitz has like these boots that makes him super fast, has seemingly other magic items as well. Nanahoshi has some magic items, the rings that seem to be like barriers. So he's thinking about getting them. He never thought about it before because they're super pricey. He clarifies at this point something that he was mistaken on, the idea that he thought that magical implements and magical items were the same thing, but they're actually two different things. Magical implements are man-made objects that have magic circles engraved on them. You then cast a certain incantation, your mana would then go into it, and then it would produce an effect. As long as your mana wasn't exhausted, it could be reused indefinitely. Magic items were objects that were infused with their own mana supply. You activate it through gestures or action. They could only produce their effects a few times per day, and their mana would regenerate after several hours. There were also weapons known as magic swords, man-made ones, that had quality of magic items. This meant that magic items were more practical and useful. No need to have mana or memorize an incantation. But most were deep inside of labyrinths, and were random in capability. This is kind of something he mentioned like in Volume 1. He was talking about the labyrinths and how they work. They have this core down there, and it seems like mana is being pulled to that core. Monsters will come down there coming after the core because they want to consume it. People will come down there. And as people died and monsters died and mana kept flowing into the core, if any equipment or something was on its path, it would get infused with mana, thus becoming a magic item. But it was always random what it would actually turn into. But you know that magic items had powerful effects that were astronomically priced. Fitz's boots were probably worth more than everything Rudeus owned. Probably. Boots of super speed would probably be very useful. But yes, he did realize the fact that because I have a massive mana supply, that means that magical implements are actually really good for me, because it's not like I'm ever going to run out of mana. But yes, Rudeus ends up running into Luke and Fitz. Luke stepping in on Fitz. They're out on a date. And he's like, man, I waited too long on Fitz, and Luke stepped in. Luke swings both ways. But no, he realized very quickly that Fitz, there's something different about Fitz. One, the fact that Fitz isn't responding to him, not saying anything, but additionally, noting that kind of carries themselves a little differently. In the novel, specifying this idea that seems a little bit differently shaped too, a lot more rounded. But yeah, Luke makes some excuse about him, not being able to talk in public, thanks for saying hi, peace out. And Rudeus is just kind of heartbroken by this, like, oh, I just got snubbed by Master Fitz. Kind of bugging me. He wants to go out and find somebody to talk to. Letting Pursena is probably not good. Everybody's busy. He immediately goes back to the library. It's kind of an odd thing. It kind of makes it out like in the anime, he chills somewhere for a while. But no, he immediately goes back, straight beelines back to the library. He decided that, I'm going to take my mind off things. I'm just going to go to the library, do some studying. And Fitz is there. So again, that's kind of the oddity where I'm way over here in the town. Fitz is there, apparently with Ariel. And then I immediately go back to the library, and Fitz is over here. It doesn't make any sense. You're supposed to be with Ariel. But yes, it kind of tries to play it off. Rudeus, in his own mind, is realizing, it was probably Ariel somehow disguised as Fitz. He doesn't know how, but somehow it's disguised. Which makes sense. If Ariel wants to go out into town, and maybe Fitz isn't on duty at the time, it makes sense to go ahead and just dress up as Fitz and go out to town, because nobody's going to try to kill Fitz. I mean, I would argue that, yeah, technically people want to get revenge against Fitz for Fitz killing somebody, but apparently she feels that it's enough because technically people are fearful of Fitz. But yeah, I like this because Rudeus is like frustrated, like, why would you snub me like that? Why would you ignore me like that? And she, again, Fitz plays it off like, I can't talk in public, I have a girly voice, so Ariel doesn't want me to talk at all in public. But I like this whole segment because there's like one of the cutest little lines here, and this idea that, and it means so much for Rudeus, this idea that he's like, oh, I thought you hated me. And Fitz goes, no, I could never hate you. And that's one of those things that kind of means a lot. And it doesn't really get too much into his mind with the books or anything like that. So this is just pure me talking here. This idea that somebody that has kind of been rejected by people so many times, betrayed in his previous life, shut in, again, betrayed by his brother, kicking him out, coming to this new world, having everybody he knows kind of displaced in different locations, coming back home, having Edis essentially leave him, betray him. It kind of means a lot, I would think, that having Fitz say that. And that kind of goes that whole effect of Fitz himself, is this idea that Rudeus relies on Fitz so much. Fitz is somebody that is strong, reliable, trusting, that he can always rely on. But no, of course, in Rudeus' mind right now, he's just thinking, oh my gosh, I'm in love with this dude. Like, he knows what all his feelings are. I'm in love with this dude. I'm falling in love with a guy. Depending on Fitz's gender, Rudeus realized at this point, he's probably going to have to come to terms with the fact that his preference is changing, or possibly just being bi. Not that it mattered for the short term, given his condition, but he was still kind of hoping that Fitz would end up being a girl. So he decided to go out and investigate. He decided to go out and investigate. Why am I Doki Doki? I gotta figure out what exactly is Fitz's gender. So he first goes and threatens Fitz's 4th year advisor with stone cannon, but still the person didn't reveal anything about Fitz. He was joking about the stone cannon threats though. But then yes, he goes to the vice principal genius. Sadly again, given the fact that he was instructed not to talk about Fitz or his employer, he couldn't say anything. Still, yes, he did reveal the fact that Fitz is a dude. But Rudeus wasn't convinced. Genius had thought about it for a weirdly long time, which they kind of portray that in the anime, that kind of long pause that he has. Yeah, he's a guy. I wonder if it's one of those aspects where I don't necessarily think that Fitz has like some kind of written information down. He's just like, dude, you really? Dude, you really don't get this? It's a joke. It's a joke. But yeah, in the end, he wanted to sleep with Fitz. He wanted to do so many things with Fitz. He wanted to experiment. He wanted to do this and that. His mind's going crazy at this point. Ends up saying that he wants to Yankee. And that's when Fitz walks in and says, what do you want to Yankee? And he immediately freaks out. Falls over on him. Did the anime trope of falling on the female character. They did it in this series too. Yes, it's everywhere in every anime. But yeah, that's when he gets a nice grab of Fitz, realizes, yeah, your figure's pretty dang feminine. Your face is kind of cute and feminine. his little guy downstairs is standing up. He's like, ain't no doubt. You're a girl, Fitz. I got a massive kick out of the response, though. Yeah, the say you nailed that scene. Immediately gets up. No, I'm a boy. It's such a girl. She's such a girl. No, I'm a boy. It was super cute. I got a huge, massive kick out of that scene. It was super good. But yeah, like I said earlier, it's like that moment he stands up and goes, oh, let me check this thing out. Yank, yank. Okay, it's not working quite yet. But no, he goes back to his room before Yankees. But I do like this because this is this point in which Rudeus is realizing, look, yeah, obviously, I think for sure now Fitz is hiding her identity. For some reason, Fitz doesn't want me to know that it's a boy. But he realized that there's a possibility that Fitz is hiding her gender for a reason. He was in love with Fitz, but he couldn't prioritize his feelings over why Fitz wanted to conceal his gender. Even right here, he's realizing, despite the fact that I'm pretty sure I know this, there's a reason why Fitz is doing this. And again, going back to earlier, he respects Fitz so much, he wants to respect Fitz's decision to hide that. He couldn't expose her secret. Instead, he would respect her wishes and help her keep up the act. I do like that aspect that, like, here's my cure. Like, this is my cure right here. I can take this, but I don't want to ruin this. Yes, he did fantasize the idea of using his knowledge of that to force her into a night together, but he fought that off. She had helped him so many times, he couldn't betray her. He would treat her the same as before. He was suddenly writhing in agony by all the comments that he made in front of her. Yes, the staff joke that the anime cut. Again, for those that missed my video on that, when Rudeus first got the staff brought to him when he was going to duel Badigadi, he took the cloth off the top of it, and Fitz kind of had a shock, and he goes, what do you think of it? She says, it's big, and he got all tingly feeling. What he said at the market, what he said when he captured Linia and Pursena, all those things suddenly went, oh crap. I like Fitz now. Fitz is not just another one of the bros, and suddenly I'm embarrassed by everything that I said. It's really funny and cute. But yeah, in the end, when he goes back to his room, realizes that things not working still, he at least now realizes that Fitz was the cure for his condition. He just didn't know what he was going to do in order to get that prescription. Curing his condition was important, but he wanted to keep Fitz's trust. He had romantic feelings for Fitz, but he didn't want to make the same mistake he'd made with Edis. Again, like back when he was first arriving in the north, he felt that he was the fault for why Edis left him. When he was talking about Sarah and everything, he was being like, keep those expectations in check. I don't want to mess this up like I did with Edis. He felt like he messed it up. But I got a kick out of this right here. He's like thinking about the fact that Man God is probably very amused right now, relying on a cross-dresser bodyguard of a princess to cure his condition. And he chuckled about it. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up the episode. Again, very well done episode. Again, my only real frustration was the stuff around Cliff and Elinalise talking about the curse and everything, because that's a lot of significant stuff. Again, the Battle Aura stuff may not be very important in the eyes of the writers and the directors for the anime adaptation. I don't know. I don't know far enough into the series to know if it's going to eventually become a very big issue. They did skip some more magic lessons, which I always like to cover these at the end of the video so that people that like the nitty-gritty nerdy stuff, they can get a sense for all this stuff. He went to his intermediate detoxification magic classes. While beginner covered mostly common elements, rarer illnesses and venoms used by high-rank monsters used a lot of mana. Intermediate detoxification classes were mostly about learning ultra-targeted spells like that. Incantations for them were painfully long. Even at intermediate, you had to chant phrases several times longer than any offensive spell. Modern incantations were abbreviated versions of older ones, but at the more advanced tier of certain disciplines, it felt like they never shortened them. For intermediate detoxification, you had to memorize more than 50 different incantations. Some of them created poisons. At advanced, you learned more than 100 spells. At Saint tier, there was supposedly less to memorize, but the amount of mana ramped up. As for King tier, you were looking at things researched and devised by one nation or another. Most were guarded secrets. This idea that technically in the higher levels of these spells, it's pretty much by nation. It's not like there's a book and you open it up and it has everything in it. These are things that are built and devised by specific nations. So you had one nation essentially creating a poison to take out another nation, and the other nations probably learning ways to counter that. It's literally turning into, geopolitics and wars. Cold War, basically. It's basically Cold War. These spells are Cold Wars. A sort of arms race, basically. The only divine tier detoxification spell that Rudeus had heard of was one to cure petrification syndrome, an illness that transformed mana inside of you into magic stone. That sounds horrible. Only one person was ever able to use the spell. It was a secret guarded carefully in the Great Cathedral of Milshan. As incantations grew longer, apparently King tier spells may require you to recite contents of an entire book out loud. Woof. It's like, okay, all right, hold on, guys. You need to heal. Hold on, sit right there. Page 1. Chapter 1. It made Rudeus plan on carrying a book around with incantations in them. He was, of course, doing this class for his condition, but the professors there told him there wasn't any intermediate tier spells that would make him more perky. After lunch, he headed to advanced healing classes. Pursena was surprisingly taking classes seriously, paying attention. She didn't normally take things seriously. Sadly, most of the students avoided her because she's a delinquent, and she even had problems getting pairs for practical skill classes. She was grateful to have Rudeus there, and even gave her her prized possession. Yes, a half-eaten piece of jerky. Probably a big deal for her. Yes, he quickly disgusted her by licking the dog drool off of it. Linia, on the other hand, was questioning Rudeus all the time about elemental spells. She was having problems with combined magic, which again is like literally everybody in the school. Like the way that the school teaches combined magic apparently sucks a lot because yes, even Sylphie had mentioned that Ariel was having problems with it. A lot of people in the school found this a stumbling block, which was odd because yes, Sylphie picked it up quickly, but maybe it was an age thing. Rudeus found it nostalgic teaching Linia all this stuff. It was difficult to get it into her head, but at the same time, she had more promise than Ghislaine. Poor Ghislaine. On the topic of Rudeus advancing, this is pretty huge. He learned his first Saint tier level Earth magic. So at this point, Rudeus has achieved Saint level in Earth magic. He was already Saint in water magic, and now he's just achieved in Earth magic. He learned the magic Sandstorm, a more powerful version of Duststorm. It blinded people and made it hard to breathe, and left shifting sands in its wake. Similar to the water spell Cumulonimbus, it seems spells of this tier involve changing weather in dramatic ways. Of course, his professor warned him about using it in towns and cities. You're gonna create a massive dust storm, sandstorm in the middle of a city is probably not gonna go over well. You can also damage crops and all this other kind of stuff, so. But yeah, at this point, he sort of like has a vague interest in actually gaining Saint level in the other two elements. He just had to find a professor that would be able to teach him. He did note at this point that yes, Badigadi did mention that his stone cannon was at the level of Imperial. He asked his professor if he could possibly call himself Emperor tier magician, which the professor said, you can call yourself whatever you wanted. He sensed a slight edge in the professor's remark, so he decided that he wouldn't do that. Nothing good would come from him advertising himself as some master mage, which kind of goes back to the whole thing. Ghislaine sort of mentioned this in passing back when Rudeus was teaching Ghislaine and Edis about arithmetic and stuff like that. He was mentioning this idea of different classes in this world, this idea of having like a magic swordsman or something like that. Even Ghislaine at that point was saying, you can call yourself whatever you want. There's this almost sense in this world that having titles are important, but not. That somebody that is, you know, this level of something doesn't necessarily mean that they're like better than everybody else. And in more cases than not, having yourself title something really important has more negative effects than anything. Yes, it's good to give people a gauge on how powerful you are so they know if they can take on some sort of problem. But at the same time, setting expectations too high could get you killed. And yes, could draw the attention of people that want to best somebody of that caliber. So it is kind of that little element where he is sort of dabbling into that whole discussion. So anyways, that was a very long recording. Hopefully, for all those that stuck around for the entire video, I hope you guys enjoyed the video as always. Again, really good episode. At the same time, a little frustrated by some of the more integral details that I honestly expect them to skip most of this stuff, but that's why I'm here, to give you guys a lowdown on all the stuff that it skips. But I hope you guys enjoyed, as always. If you did, make sure to hit that like button down below before you leave. And additionally, if you like to support this content and you have the means to, I would greatly appreciate if you consider supporting on Patreon. Tips, link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly appreciate everybody it does. And until the next Mushoku Sundays, y'all take care.